Hi and welcome to the video on ideas on how to manage unprocessed trauma. So I'm going to try and whiz through this, mainly because, as you probably noticed, I have a habit of making some very long videos. So that means that because I'm whizzing through it, I'm not going to cover everything. So please go and look for more information on the internet of things that you're seeing that I'm talking about that you want to know more about. The ideas in this video are ways of explaining trauma and managing trauma that I use with clients, and they find these very helpful. So I'm really hoping that you'll find them useful too. And if you're not already under adult mental health services and you think you are suffering from some unprocessed trauma, please do consider either talking to your GP or referring direct. There's some really great trauma-focused therapies out there, and NICE guidelines currently recommend trauma-focused CBT and EMDR, both of which have some really great results. Okay. So in order to look at trauma, what we need to look at is what are our natural defense mechanisms? What are the things that helped us survive as human beings throughout all these years? So if we go back to the Stone Age, and we have a look at what it might have been like to survive in those days, I'm guessing you're anticipating there was probably quite a lot of unexpected obstacles and danger around. So people had to be very alert. Also, as human beings, we're better in groups. We're not as good on our own, and we have to be able to respond really quickly. So that means that we have what would be called a negative bias. And that is, if you were to look at this picture and you were to see a bush moving in the background, your immediate reaction is unlikely to be, oh, I wonder if a crowd of beautiful birds are going to emerge from that bush. Your reaction is more likely to be, oh, what's that? On instant alert. Now, the brain's doing that because it needs to anticipate potential threat at any given time to keep us safe, to help us survive. And it goes one step further as well, because it doesn't even need to see all the threat. So you could have something very small poking out of a bush, and your brain would do the rest. It would come up with every possible threat there could be that could be emerging from that bush. So can you see right at the beginning, we are set to anticipate threat. So let's have a look at what happens when we experience that threat. So here we have a cave person out to do some hunting. Now the cave person has expected to see a really quite small dinosaur that's going to be very manageable. However, what happens is, just round the corner, Tyrannosaurus Rex appears. So, completely unexpected, much larger than was anticipated, and what's going to happen to our Stone Age person is going to have an immediate reaction. And so this reaction happens in a millisecond and basically involves every part of the body and mind getting ready to survive, to either run like mad, flee, always my preferred option, or fight. So this reaction that's going on in our bodies affects our entire body. So our heart rate pumps a lot faster, our breathing rate gets faster. Everything is geared to protecting our most important organs. So that means that it might feel that all the blood is coming directly from the external parts of us to the internal parts of us, and makes our heartbeat even faster. At the same time, our digestive system shuts down, because you don't really need to be sitting down and eating a hearty meal at a time like this. Equally, you don't need to be thinking about what you're going to be buying at the shops next day. So what happens is everything about your mind becomes focused on the threat, and your body aids that by making sure that your vision is more acute, that your hearing and your sense of smell is on red alert. So all your senses become much more sensitive to the surroundings. And because your mind is focused on this threat and to the exclusion of everything else, really, really hard to concentrate on anything else. So that means that not only is it hard to concentrate on anything else but the threat in front of you, it's also hard to remember anything else other than the threat in front of you. So that means now is not the time to be able to remembering what you're going to buy at the shops tomorrow. So can you see how your system is geared up at every single level to make sure that you are ready and prepared, which is why your muscles feel tight, why your breathing feels shallow, where everything feels on hyper alert and you are acutely aware of your surroundings. Now, let's suppose our Stone Age person is very successful at running away, survives to tell another tale. It takes around 20 to 60 minutes for our systems to calm back down again. And then our minds need to be able to process what happened. So let's look at what our brain does. So the Stone Age person might go back to the cave and go, hey, you'll never guess what I saw. There might be some chatting about what happened. There might be some, oh, how did you escape that scenarios going on. The Stone Age person might have a few dreams about the experience. They might find some thoughts or images intruding about it. They might find themselves just wanting to take themselves away and just on their own to just have a bit of a quiet think and reflect about what happened. But over a period of time, usually about a month, that experience is processed by the brain and is integrated and stored away. And the learning that we have from that, we are able to use for future experiences. Sometimes, however, we experience events that are over and above what we would normally expect to experience, where we don't have the support network around us that we need, or sometimes where the events that we experience are multiple, prolonged, and over a long period of time. So when that happens, the brain finds it difficult to process those memories. And that's what we call unprocessed trauma. You know that your trauma is unprocessed because it's still impacting on you in your day-to-day life. And it just feels like it's sort of in front of your face rather than to the back and in the past. It doesn't feel like it's in the past. So let's have a look at what the brain is actually doing. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the brain. There is lots and lots of information on the internet and you can look up to your heart's desire. So this is a very basic run through. But basically what you'll see at the bottom is the amygdala. That's our very primitive part of our brain. That governs our survival and it has a hairpin trigger. So that's the one that sends out all the messages to trigger a flight or fight response. It's so sensitive that you could show somebody a picture of an angry face and their brain would react, they would react as if it was actually a person. Until the information gets through to the thinking part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, which says, hey, it's just a photo. So information reaches the amygdala first, it's in a millisecond. It takes a lot longer for information to reach the thinking part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex. So that means sometimes we can react to situations as if we're in danger when actually there is no danger there. At the same time, if we experience a traumatic event, the hippocampus, which processes memory, normally just sort of goes round, processes the memory. I mean, it doesn't actually do this, but this is an illustration. Goes round, processing the memory, happy days, memory in the background. But sometimes when the memory is hard to process, it gets stuck. It gets stuck as if it's a record getting stuck in the same place. Now, for those of you who are too young to remember records, the equivalent is downloading a video and it getting stuck on the buffering. Now, one unprocessed memory is hard enough to deal with, but sometimes there are a lot of unprocessed memories and they all stack up on each other. So if you were looking at records as a metaphor, you'd have a stack of records all getting stuck in different places, but stacked up against each other. And in the same way, if you were looking at downloading lots of videos, there might be times when you've got several things downloading, but there's too many. Or it may be that the internet speed's not very good, or there's technical problems, but whatever happens is you've got a stack of downloads all happening at the same time, all getting stuck at different points. And that's what it's like having a lot of unprocessed trauma. So when this happens, your brain thinks that this trauma is still happening now because the hippocampus, remember, has not been able to process it. Because it still thinks that this trauma is happening now, the amygdala reacts to anything associated with that trauma because the brain works by association. So that means sometimes for somebody, a harmless clock can bring on a flight or fight response because there's an association with a previous traumatic event. Because the trauma hasn't been processed, what you then have is recurring dreams. You get dreams that are sort of going over things over and over again. You get intrusive images coming in, you get intrusive thoughts coming in. Sometimes it can change the way that you see yourself and other people and the world. And if you think every time you have an association with a past trauma and it triggers that flight or fight response because your brain thinks this is happening now, you get all those symptoms that our Stone Age person got when they faced Tyrannosaurus Rex. And then you have to spend 20 to 60 minutes bringing your system back down again. So does it make sense to you then that actually if you are suffering with unprocessed trauma, it is going to really disrupt your everyday functioning. It's quite hard to function with all of that going on. So actually you are doing incredibly well to just manage any everyday task at the moment. And it's no wonder that you may feel that you're not able to remember anything, that it's really hard to concentrate on things, because your brain thinks it's trying to protect you, so its focus is on any threat. And that's been heightened because of all the experiences that you've had that haven't been processed. What happens then is you become what we would call hypervigilant. So it's like you become more and more aware of scanning for danger in your environment. You might have what we call a startle response, where you find yourself being quite jumpy. All of these things are happening at the same time for different events and repeatedly. It is exhausting. Is it no wonder then that you might feel tired? Because you're having these flight or fight responses and then your system's coming down and you're going into a slump. And then the flight or fight happens again. Is it any wonder that your sleep might be really disrupted? Very difficult to get a good night's sleep when your brain thinks you're in danger. Especially if your brain keeps trying to process all this trauma and then gives you lots of dreams or nightmares. So let's have a look at the few techniques that you could use relatively quickly when these triggers happen. What we want to do is we want to update the brain, because our brains are convinced that the trauma we experienced in the past is still happening now in the present. And because it's convinced of that, it's trying to protect us. So what we need to do is we need to educate our brains to update them on actually what is the real situation right now. So we're updating the brain from the past to the present. bit like updating software. So how do we do that? I'm going to go through a series of questions, and it's almost like a mantra that helps your brain do this. And when I go through them, you probably go, but I know all this. And you probably do, and that's not the problem. It's just that the brain needs a more concrete way of absorbing that information so that it can update itself. And it also needs to update itself several times. It needs that evidence going over several times before it sort of begins to realise that actually you're not in danger now. So the first thing that we do is we notice what we're feeling and we acknowledge that. So I'm having these feelings or sensations or thoughts for good reasons, and they are for good reasons. This is your natural system just alerting you to the fact that you might be in danger and wanting to protect you. They are here because of what happened in the past. That's what's triggering them. And this statement's really important. It is not happening now. Now, at some level, you sort of know it's not happening now, but it doesn't feel like that at the time. So being able to say to yourself, it's not happening now, is really important for your brain to have a concrete message. And here's the really important bit. Your brain needs evidence of this. It won't just accept it's not happening now. So I know it's not happening now because, and this is where you scan your environment for evidence. So I know it's not happening now because I am in, for example, I'm in the study. I wasn't in the study when this trauma happened, is a good example. I am so many years old. So if something happened when you were in your late teens, early 20s, and you're now in your 30s, your brain doesn't acknowledge that. It still thinks that you're back there in your teens or your early 20s. So telling your brain, reminding your brain how old you are is really important. So what you're saying is, I am in the study, I am 38 years old. I'm not, but let's use this as an example. I am 38 years old. It is. And this evidence is really important as well. And mobile phones are great for this because if you pick a mobile phone up, it automatically has the date and time. And this is where you start to gather more evidence. When I look about me, I can see. Now, when you're looking about you, you need to be looking at something that tells your brain it's not happening now because there are distinct differences from what you're seeing now to where you were before. So it might be something as simple as an item of clothing that you've bought recently. It might be a piece of jewellery, it might be a watch, it might just be your mobile phone, because we update those all the time, don't we? It might be worth looking at a recent photo of yourself or a loved one or even a pet that's been taken recently. It may be, if it's a pet, that actually you didn't have that pet at the time of the incident. It may be you have a picture on your wall that is new. It may be that you've changed the colour, the paintwork of the room that you're in. Whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. What really matters is that your brain is aware that there is differences now to what happened in the past. Okay. So, let's just go through this again. When you're all triggered and you're experiencing that flight or fight, the first thing that you're going to do is acknowledge what you're feeling. I'm having these feelings, thoughts, sensations for good reasons. They are because of what happened in the past. It is not happening now. I know it's not happening now because I am so many years old. It is somewhere in 2020, unless you're watching this next year, in which case you're going to have to adjust the date. When I look about me, I can see. Could be anything, but what are you noticing right now when you look around your environment and you think, what is different that I'm seeing now? that tells me that this incident is not happening now. And this takes practice. So you might think, oh, actually this is great because the brain's going to take this evidence and this information, it's going to update immediately. Or look upon it as like a really difficult download on the computer, or getting stuck with some software. Sometimes you need to run it through several times. And also what we're talking about is managing unprocessed trauma. The best way of dealing with unprocessed trauma is to have therapy and to have therapy that processes that trauma. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to ask yourself some specific questions, which again are things that you will know. So it feels a bit strange, this, because it feels like you're asking yourself something that's obvious, but for your brain it's crucial. So for the first one is, at this moment, in this place, am I safe? Now obviously, if you're in a place which isn't safe, please get yourself out of there. Do something to make yourself safe. But most of the time when we're triggered, we're usually in places where actually we're okay, we're safe. So at this moment, in this place, am I safe? At this moment, in this place, am I physically in danger? At this moment, in this place, is anyone I care about in physical danger? Asking yourself those questions and getting a, yeah, I'm safe, no, I'm not physically in danger, and no, nobody I care about is in physical danger either, helps your brain know that you are in the present, not the past. So it's another way of giving evidence to your brain that actually what happened was in the past and is not happening now. And then the next thing you can do is some basic grounding techniques. So there are a lot of information on the internet, and I encourage you to go and Google as much as you can, because the more information you have, the more you will understand what is happening to you is very natural, and there's some really great techniques to reduce the level of disturbance that you're experiencing. So this is a sort of basic grounding exercise. First thing is breathing. So if you remember back to the symptoms I was saying when we have that flight or fight, we have short, fast breaths, don't we? So here's the thing about the body and the mind. Just as the mind can send messages to the body to say, actually you're in danger, red alert, let's gear up for this, so can us manipulating our bodies send a message to our brains to say, actually everything's fine. And breathing is one way that we do this. So if you think about what happened with the flight or fight, with your shallow, fast breathing, what we need to do is we need to slow that breathing down. Now sometimes that's going to feel quite difficult to do, particularly if you're in a state of high arousal. So give yourself some time with this. You might want to just notice your breath. If you can, over a period of time, make a longer breath out than the breath that you take in, because when we take a longer breath out, our system relaxes. Imagine that you're breathing in through your stomach rather than your chest. Then as you're doing this, look around your environment and name 5 things you can see. So have a go at doing that now. It doesn't really matter what those 5 things are. When you've got 5 things, I want you to pick one. And what you're going to do is you're just going to focus on that one object, and you're going to just describe it in detail, which I realise also sounds a bit strange. But if you ask your brain to focus on that object and describe it, so the colour, the pattern, the texture, what you imagine the weight might be, or you could even feel the weight of it, then what you're asking your brain to do is focus on the present. And when it's in the present, it can't focus on the past. Happy days. Then name 4 things you can hear. Now, if you're in a really silent room, this is possibly going to be more difficult. So you might just notice if there's any sounds. Next thing is to reach out and touch 3 things. Touch is really important, it grounds us. So you might just make your feet touch the floor. So if you do that now and you just focus on your feet touching the floor, just notice what that's like. And maybe put your hands on the surface and notice what that's like. You may have something that you find quite comforting. Some people find some things quite soft, comforting. Equally, something that's cold and extreme can bring us right back into the here and now. So sometimes people put damp sponges in the freezer, or they hold an ice cube, something that's just going to bring your senses alert very, very quickly and bring you back into the here and now. Another important one when it comes to sort of touch and the body is to move. When you think about a flight or fight response, your muscles are really, really tense. And particularly if you go into a freeze response, you're going to feel like you're quite rigidly rooted to the spot. So move. If you're sitting, stand up. If you're standing, sit down. Move your arms. Shoulders are a great one to just shrug your shoulders up and down. If you can, hold it for a few seconds and then release. Have a bit of a stamp. Intense exercise is great for situations like this because basically what your body is trying to do is get rid of a lot of energy. It's built up, your body's ready to go and it's not going anywhere. So even running up and down the stairs is really useful. Don't pace though, because if you pace, what you're doing is you're going backwards and forwards and you're likely to get more and more agitated and you're going to send another message to your brain going, whoa, I'm in danger, red alert. Another good grounding technique is to use the other 2 senses of smell and taste. It needs to be something that sort of makes you go like that. So I don't know about you, but Olbus oil always is amazingly good because it stinks. Equally, you might prefer to have like a nice perfume or aftershave by you, aromatherapy oils, something that you can just pick up and smell that brings you back into the here and now. And the same with taste. It needs to be something that sort of like is quite tangy. So those fizzy sour sweets or a lemon slice. I've put blue cheese down here, so very, very strong cheese, something that is going to stimulate your taste buds quite quickly. So then when you've done all those things, your system's sort of coming down. Then what you want to be doing is looking at self-soothing or turning your attention to a task that you'd like to get done. Preferably not something too complicated. So maybe go for a walk, have a soak in a bath, make a hot drink, put on a non-emotional program, no drama. If you're feeling like you're a bit sad or a bit low but slumpy after that, then having some time on the sofa with a blanket and hot water bottle can really help. Just make sure that you just don't do it for a long period of time because your system does need to get up and going again. And the other area that you could use on a regular basis is progressive muscle relaxation. And I usually recommend this because a lot of people find relaxation exercises with imagery quite difficult because their mind keeps taking them off into places. And which is really understandable because our minds do that, and if you've experienced trauma it's going to do it even more. Progressive muscle relaxation is really good because it works by tensing and releasing each muscle group in turn, so you have to listen to the instructions. But also what it's doing is it's teaching your body how to relax again. Once you've experienced a lot of trauma over a long period of time, your body is used to being tense a lot. So we're trying to teach your body on how to relax. And the great thing about that is when it's able to use progressive muscle relaxation, it's like an instant signal to the brain that, hey, everything's fine. Because let's face it, you wouldn't be relaxing your muscles if you were facing Tyrannosaurus Rex, would you? So, I hope this has been helpful. Please experiment and play with this. Some techniques work better from others, and it's basically about finding the ones that work for you. There are some great websites that you can use. The Get Self-Help website is particularly good. I've put some others on the description of the video that you could click on. And equally, if you're thinking actually after watching this video, I probably would like to get a bit more help with this, either talk to your GP or you can self-refer to any IAP service. So if you go onto the NHS website and search for find an NHS psychological therapist service, it will come up with one in your area. So in the meantime, I wish you well and happy experimenting.